Hey family, welcome back to another edition of the Opolotive ICT Solutions. Now in this video today we are going to look at the disassembly and reassembly of this laptop, Lenovo T470 laptop, and it's a ThinkPad model, and we are going to be focusing on replacement of other parts. For example, replacement of RAM, replacement of hard drive, and see other parts in details that are entailed in this laptop. So join me as we disassemble and reassemble this Lenovo ThinkPad T470 right away. So first things first, we need to first remove, or rather disconnect, the external battery, and this is the external battery that we need to disconnect, just like this. And once we are done disconnecting that external battery, we then focus on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws that we need to unscrew. And right away, using our Phillips screwdriver, we can then unscrew this. That is screw number 1. We go to screw number 2, screw number 3, screw number 4, screw number 5, and then screw number 6. So once we are done, we can then get our ply tool here, and at the extreme corner is where we can put our ply tool and open wide the cover, as we do it in a circular motion, rotating it around the cover, the laptop cover, as you flip open it very well. So on loosening the cover, we can then gently turn to the other side, and also do the same. You have to do this gently so that you don't affect any parts. So that you don't break any locks. This is the cover. Now that we have removed the cover, we need now to focus on disconnecting the internal battery, or rather the secondary battery that is entailed in this laptop. Now this laptop has two batteries. It has an internal battery and an external battery, and for this case, this is our internal battery, which is the secondary battery, and we need to disconnect it off the motherboard. Remember, first things first, always disconnect any power source onto the laptop. In case you want to replace the battery, you can always just it has two screws. One screw number 1, which is this one, actually it has one screw, which is this one. So we can and it has two, one, and the second one is here. This is the second one, so we can disconnect the battery. Now this is our battery that we need to disconnect. In case you want to replace, you can always replace it just the way it is. And moving forward, it has a hard drive, which is in case you want to replace this hard drive, HDD drive, you can always it has a lock here, or rather a handle here, that you can get out gently, just like this. You pull out that lock and then lift it up gently. So this is the hard drive, which is the HDD, and you can unlock it. You can unlock the connector of the motherboard, and then once it's done, you can pull it out gently. So this is the hard drive, and it's a Toshiba, and this one is basically it's a SATA hard drive, and 500 GB size, and this is its connector. So in case you want to replace this with any other type or upgrade, you can always do that, just like that. So I'll put it aside as well. Now this specific model, the T470, has 2 stereo speakers. It has 2 integrated stereo speakers, and they are connected using the same line, as you can see. If I may show it to you closely, it has this speaker and this speaker. Now they connect directly onto using the same line and connect it down to the motherboard. So we need to disconnect it as well. In case you want to replace, you can always disconnect it here and unscrew the 2 screws for the first stereo speaker, which is this one. But remember, it has a cable passage for the other speaker. So in case you want to replace, you can always replace it just like that. You can always replace it just like that. So this is the speaker. I'll put them aside. Now moving on, we have what we call the fan connector. We have the cooling system, which connects the fan pipe, connecting the fan pipe onto the processor and provide good enough aeration for cooling the processor. And let's also remove that and see how it behaves. So the processor has numbers. In case you want to replace the fan system, the cooling system, you have to follow the number pattern. So right away I can unscrew this, and unscrew this. So once we're done unscrewing, we can either first disconnect the fan of the motherboard. Disconnect the fan off the motherboard, and then gently lift up the entire system. So this is the entire system. And remember, when replacing, you can always put back the thermal paste to allow easy contact with the processor itself. The processor is inbuilt, as you can see. It's attached firmly onto the motherboard. So this is the cooling system as it is. So let's put it aside as well, gently there. Now once we are done with that, we can then proceed to the RAM. The RAM, this specific laptop T470 has 2 RAM slots. It has this one and this one. So it has 1 RAM stick which is always supplied with the laptop itself. So we can remove that RAM. In case you want to upgrade, you can always add another chip, or in case you want to further upgrade using 1 single slot, you can always use upgrade the RAM stick. It's a DDR4, and this one is over 8 GB size, so you can always upgrade to another 8 GB to make it 16 GB, but it has a maximum of 32 GB. So let's put that aside as well. Now that we are done, there is this provision of a wireless card, which is here. We need to also disconnect it. It has 2 points. We can remove it. This is the wireless card responsible for the wireless connectivity of the laptop. So we can put it aside as well. Now that we are done, we have what we call the CMOS battery, responsible for keeping the time of the laptop itself. So we can also disconnect it gently and put it aside. Now here we still have other connections. We have an extra connection cable wires here, and these are just extensions. We can put them aside. Then here, of course, we have what we call the touchpad connecting onto the laptop frame. But before we go into that, let's first disconnect all the other connectors connecting onto the motherboard. So let's disconnect these connectors, fingerprint connector, and then the touchpad connector. So once we are done disconnecting that, we can then focus on any other connection. We have this one coming from the power line, which is the power cord connector, that we can disconnect off the laptop. And then we have this other EDP cable, 30 pin EDP cable, which we need to also disconnect off the motherboard. And this is how you can disconnect it from the motherboard. Once that is done, we have another connector here that we need to disconnect off the board. Now remember, we have what we call the keyboard on the other side that we didn't remove, or rather we were supposed to disconnect it first. We hurried into the video. In case you missed out on the steps on how to replace the keyboard for this video, I'm going to put a link down below on how to replace this. So we can just since we already disconnected the screws, we can just remove the keyboard gently. Just flip it gently here and then remove the connectors, the keyboard connectors. So in case you want to replace the keyboard, there is a full detailed video on how to replace the keyboard for this T470 keyboard. And proceed. So once that is done, we can then now start first disconnecting this part of the motherboard, the one that holds the RG45 and the USB HDMI connectors. So we can unscrew these 3 screws gently, then remove that cover that attaches those connections. So once that is done, then we have this other kit that holds the USB of the opposite side, and we need to remove it firmly, also gently. So once we are done with that, we then focus on the motherboard. And the motherboard has 1, 2, if you follow so keenly, 3, 4, 5 screws that we need to unscrew. But before we do that, there is another connection, LCD connection, that connects the screen to the motherboard here, that we need to disconnect. Yeah. So once we are done with that, there is another one that we had missed counting. So there are 6. Let's actually start from that very one that is close to the SD card reader. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So once we are done, we can then remove gently we can remove the motherboard. So this is the motherboard. This is how it appears, and it is the main. So we need to, as a measure, we need to clean off the dust, and I'll use my brush here as a protective measure. We'll clean off the dust gently, nice and slow. So moving on, in case you want to replace the pad, in case you want to replace the pad, you can always use you can always unscrew these, the touchpads. You can always unscrew these 4 screws. Just like that, and there you go. After disconnecting this, disconnect that, and this is the ThinkPad. That is being replaced. Now this whole part is what we call the palmrest keyboard bezel. It's a keyboard bezel. The entire this is where the palms rest, so it's a palmrest keyboard bezel. And in case you want to replace this, you can always just detach the hinges from the bezel. Detach the remove these two screws, disconnect off the hinge to disconnect off the hinges, and then this other side has 3 screws. Then you can always replace the entire part. It's available on it's available online. You can always have a copy of it. So there's a friend of mine who asked me how to replace the palmrest for this Lenovo T470. So that is how you can just disconnect off these hinges, then just replace with a new keyboard bezel that you would have bought. So we are not going to do that. And in case you want to replace your screen, there is a video that I'm going to link up below so that you can find it up and see how you can replace the screen. So let's proceed by reassembling these parts, and let's start with our touchpad here. So this touchpad, we need to put it back into its position gently. Remember, it has to fit in well. Once we are done, we can then get our 4 screws. Once it has fitted very well into its position, we get our 4 screws and attach them to the pad. So in case you want to replace the pad, that is the other way of replacing. But for that, you don't need to first remove the motherboard. You can just remove it directly from here, since this part won't be covered. It's only the battery, the inner battery, or rather the secondary battery, that you have to first remove. So let's proceed by connecting back our touchpad connector onto the touchpad itself, and once that is done, we lock it very well. So once that is done, we still get you see there is this fingerprint reader, that is the FPR, which connects to the motherboard. Now this one is the touchpad and this one is the fingerprint. So we need to put back our motherboard gently, of course after cleaning it up very well, we need to put it back gently. Now ensuring that all these cables are on top. Ensuring that all these cables are aligned very well. Now be careful with this cable here, this connector. Don't lock it out. Don't lock it out. Just be careful with it so that it doesn't, so that it's not locked out. Just like that. These other connectors also have to be outside, so that underneath there is nothing, there's no connection that we have left. So once we are done, we can then get our 6 screwdrivers for the motherboard and put them back to their respective positions. So we start with that number 1. Be careful, in case you forgot where you got them from, they always have arrows pointing where you're supposed to put the screw. Where you see an arrow is where you put this, one of the 6 screws, yeah. And once that is done, we look for another one, which is here. No, wait a moment. Yep, there is one there. It has an arrow, and there's one here with an arrow, and we remain with 2. Remaining with 2. Remaining with 2. One will go here in this extreme corner, and we shall remain with 1, which goes to the other extreme corner. There, right? So once that is done, oops, remember this one has 3, meaning one is not supposed to go here. One is supposed to go to another location, which is up here. And so here we have these ones. These ones are 3 already. You see, I saw an arrow here. I'm wondering why it was put there. There's an arrow here, that's why we had put that screw back in that position, but it's not the position. So you have to always be keen when putting back those screws, yeah. So once that is done, we can then put that back our 3 screws. Put that screw number 1. Put the screw number 2. And then we get this, our screw number 4. Sorry, screw number 3. Screw number 3. So once that is done, we can connect back our this LCD, and then we align these cables properly. We align these cables properly into their pathway. But we need to get these two also, two screws back here. We need to get the two screws back here. So once that is done, can now proceed with putting back the connections. So the first connection here will be this EDP cable, and then we have this power cable that is connecting from the power cord source. Also put it back onto the connector. Then we have this other connection right here that we need to connect. Then we go back to this touchpad connector and we connect it as well back onto the, then we get the fingerprint reader, that is the FPR, also have it connected back. Then we get our, we get the wireless card, put it back, connect the wireless card, put it back, attach it back gently with its screw. And then connect. Connect the wireless cables. Connect them back gently. We have a separator here that we can use to separate these extra cables. There's some glue, but in case you are not careful, the glue always rubs off, just like it does, just like it has done for this one. So we connect the wireless card. We then connect the wireless card gently. Just like that. So once we are done with that, we then get our cooling system, which is here. We put back our fan and the processor back into its position. So we align it back into its position firmly. Start by connecting the fan. After connecting, we can then tighten these screws for the, remember to put the thermal paste in case you have, so that it keeps the processor very safe. So we tighten these processor screws in support of the cooling fan. So once we are done, we then get our CMOS battery back into its position and connect it back. Connect it back here. Once that is done, we can now then get our hard drive, which we can put back gently, fix back gently. You can just fix it back gently, just like that, and then connect it to the motherboard using its connector. Once that is done, we can then put back our RAM stick. Remember, in case you want to replace your RAM or upgrade your RAM, you can always do it just like this. So once that is done, you can then get our stereo speakers back into their position, and this is where you put the first one, put back its screw, its two screws, screw number 1 and screw number 2. So in case you are replacing, then you put the cable pathway, put back the cable into its pathway very well. Ensuring that it's fixed firmly to avoid any problems. When you're covering, to avoid any problems when putting back the cover. So you have to ensure that it moves in line with its position in its pathway. So once that is done, we can then get back our screw. Put back our screw and the second screw as well. Put the second screw as well. Then connect the speaker back. That is done, we then get back our internal battery, or rather secondary battery, and put it back into its position here. And get back our two screws. First screw goes here, and the second screw goes here. So once that is done, we can then connect back the battery And once we are done with connecting back the battery, we then connect back our cover. Put back our cover in its firm position. Ensuring that it's fitted very well. Now you see, and booms, it will close very well. So once that is done, we can then close our screws. But remember, we need to first put back the keyboard, and this is our keyboard. We need to first connect it back here. You can get the link on how to replace keyboard for this specific T470 laptop on the link below. So once we are done, we can then put it back there and then put it inside. So that we can lock those other two screws. The flip open now. These are the two screws for the keyboard to tighten the keyboard, and there we go. We shall tighten them. Then tighten this side also. And this side. So once that is done, we then get our battery and then fix it back in. So once that is done, we can then power on the laptop, and there we go. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching this channel, and thank you for watching. See you soon in the next video. Cheers.